Ladies and gentlemen, your mind is the most powerful tool you possess, but the tragedy is that most people live their entire lives letting that tool control them instead of mastering it. They let the mind become a prison. They let fear, doubt, rejection, and negativity seep in and shape their identity, their self-image, and eventually their destiny. The truth is, your mind is not designed to hold you back. It is designed to expand, to elevate, to create, to transform the invisible into the visible. But this only happens when you begin to think, when you begin to direct it, when you begin to take charge of it. Most people don't realize that the only reason they stay down is because they believe the lie their mind tells them when they're at their lowest. They hear a voice that says, "You're not good enough," and they accept it as truth. They feel a wave of fear, and they take it as a warning to stop rather than a signal to grow. They experience rejection and assume it's a reflection of their worth rather than a redirection of their path. The mind isn't the enemy. It becomes the enemy when you leave it undisciplined. It becomes a cage when you feed it nothing but your failures. But the same mind that plays the highlight reel of your past mistakes can be trained to visualize your highest potential. The same mind that floods you with doubt when things get hard can be trained to speak power into your soul. You've been conditioned since childhood, by school, by society, by trauma, by circumstance, to think in limitations, to expect no, to fear risk, to doubt greatness. But conditioning can be broken. You are not a victim of your past. You are not a prisoner of how you were raised. You are not bound by what they said to you or what they didn't say to you. You are free the moment you decide to be. But that freedom doesn't come from external success. It comes from a mental shift, a shift that says, I am in control, I direct my mind, I choose what thoughts I entertain, I reject what doesn't serve me. You see, negative thoughts will come. That's part of the human experience. You're going to hear inner voices telling you to quit, to give up, to stop trying. You're going to have days where your emotions run high, where failure knocks on your door, where everything feels stacked against you. But what separates the few who rise from the many who stay stuck is the awareness that they are not their thoughts. You are the thinker of the thoughts. You are not the fear. You are the observer of fear. And when you understand that, you take back your power. The mind is programmable. Just like a computer, it responds to repetition, belief, and emotional intensity. You can feed it new data. You can rewire it through daily disciplines. You can condition it to expect abundance, to handle pressure, to embrace challenges. But that requires you to stop passively thinking and start actively choosing. Every time you visualize success, you're laying down a mental blueprint. Every time you speak power into yourself, you're reinforcing a new belief system. Every time you act in spite of fear, you're teaching your mind a new way to behave under stress, and over time, that changes who you are. Not because you faked it, but because you finally tapped into who you were always meant to be before the world buried you under its lies. People talk about mindset like it's just a nice idea or some motivational concept. It's not. It's life or death for your potential. Your mindset determines how you see yourself, how you interpret the world, how you deal with failure, how you respond to pressure, how you bounce back from loss. If your mind is set in limitation, you will never see opportunity, even when it's right in front of you. If your mind is set in fear, you will never take action, even when the path is clear. If your mind is set in weakness, you will never win, no matter how many resources you have. That's why the first battle is always internal. That's why every victory starts in the mind before it ever manifests in the world. Because until you believe it's possible, you won't even try. You have to wake up and take authority over your mind like a commander on the battlefield. You have to guard your thoughts like your life depends on it, because it does. You have to interrupt the loops of self-doubt that play over and over in your head and replace them with statements of truth, of strength, of possibility. You have to catch yourself when you start to spiral into fear and remind yourself that fear is just a story. You have to speak to yourself like a warrior in training, not a victim of circumstance, and you have to be relentless about it, every day without exception. Because if you don't take control of your mind, the world will, the media will, your past will, the people who doubted you will, and they'll keep you small, broken, and scared. But when you decide to reclaim that control, when you train your mind to see challenge as opportunity, failure as feedback, and rejection as redirection, everything changes. You become dangerous. You become focused. You become someone who refuses to stay down, not because life got easier, but because you got mentally stronger. You become someone who doesn't need external permission to rise. You rise because it's who you are. Because you trained for this. Because your mindset is no longer reactive. It's proactive, bulletproof, and driven by purpose. Most people crumble at the word no. They treat rejection like it's a final judgment on their worth, as if hearing no means they aren't good enough, smart enough, capable enough, or deserving of success. That single word becomes a weight on their chest, a shadow over their dreams, and a chain around their confidence. But what they don't understand is that a no is never the end. It's simply a redirection. It's the universe, life, or circumstance telling you, not here, not now, not this way. But it's never saying never. Only the weak interpret rejection as a full stop. The strong see it as a detour sign, a signal to change the route but not the destination. You're not being denied. You're being directed toward the version of you that can handle the success you say you want. Too many people carry the scars of rejection like permanent tattoos. They get turned down once and they never try again. Someone tells them they're not talented and they stop chasing their goal. They experience failure in business or relationships and convince themselves that they're doomed to lose forever. But here's the truth that most never hear. Rejection is not personal. Rejection is situational. A no doesn't mean you are not worthy. It just means the situation, the timing, or the environment wasn't aligned. But most don't take the time to think like that. They internalize it. They let it shape their identity. And that's the biggest mistake you can make, letting an external no define your internal belief. Rejection is feedback. It's a mirror showing you where you need to evolve. It's the pressure that builds your resilience. Every great achiever has faced hundreds of no's on the road to their dreams. The difference is they used each one as fuel. They didn't cry about it. They didn't retreat. They didn't throw themselves a pity party. They looked at that rejection and said, "Good. Now I know what to fix. Now I know where to get better. Now I know I'm getting closer." That's what mentally strong people do. They reinterpret rejection. They make no a teacher, not a wall, because they understand the truth. Your ability to handle no determines how far you go in life. If you're afraid of hearing no, you will live your life in a cage. You'll stop yourself from asking for the opportunity, from taking the shot, from pushing your limits. Fear of rejection kills more dreams than failure ever will. That fear keeps you silent when you should speak. It keeps you small when you should expand. It keeps you hidden when you should shine. You've got to decide that hearing no isn't painful. What's painful is staying stuck in a life that never sees your potential realized. Rejection is temporary. Regret is forever, and regret is the result of people avoiding discomfort at the expense of growth. It all comes down to how you frame it. You can choose to make rejection your excuse or your motivation. You can let it break you or build you. You can either curl up and believe the lie that you're not cut out for greatness, or you can rise up, refine your approach, and come back stronger. The most dangerous person in any room is the one who doesn't take no personally. That's the person who can't be broken by temporary setbacks. That's the person who shows up again and again, no matter how many times they've been told they can't. That's the person who rewrites their story, not because the world handed them an easy path, but because they refused to give up when the world slammed the door in their face. Every time you're rejected, you're being given a choice. Will you accept it as defeat or transform it into development? Will you shrink or will you sharpen your edge? Most people never even realize how close they are to a breakthrough when they quit. They turn back just before the moment when their persistence would have paid off. Why? Because they gave no the power to dictate their behavior. They heard no and took it as a command to stop rather than a challenge to evolve. But if you start to see no as part of the process, not the problem, everything changes. It becomes fuel, it becomes fire, it becomes the sound that triggers your hunger, your drive, your growth. Rejection also exposes who you really are. It reveals your grit. It tests your commitment. When the world tells you no, will you fold or will you push harder? Will you validate their doubt, or will you rise and prove them wrong? Every no you face is another chance to strengthen your character. It's another opportunity to get clear on what you want and how bad you're willing to work for it. It's life filtering out the people who don't have the stomach for success. It's a call to the few who are willing to keep showing up long after others have gone home. So let them say no. Let them doubt you. Let them reject you. It only makes the reward sweeter, the victory louder, the growth undeniable. If you want to rewrite your destiny, you have to stop fearing rejection and start using it. Treat every no like a puzzle piece, like data, like feedback for your evolution. Study it, learn from it. Use it to get sharper, more focused, more unstoppable. Because the only thing more dangerous than a person who never hears no is the one who hears it 1,000 times and still refuses to give up. Rejection is not failure, it's a filter separating the committed from the curious, the weak from the relentless, the average from the extraordinary, and the moment you stop seeing no as a personal attack and start seeing it as your training ground, you become a threat to every limitation that once held you down. Most people wait to feel motivated before they act. They wait for the perfect mood, the perfect timing, the perfect alignment of circumstances before they choose to rise. But what they don't understand is that motivation is fleeting, unreliable, and shallow. It's based on emotion, and emotion is inconsistent. If you only get back up when you feel like it, you will spend most of your life down. That's why the ability to refuse to stay down isn't a matter of mood, it's a matter of discipline. It's a decision, a repeated habit, an internal standard that you set for yourself long before the world ever knocks you down. Getting back up doesn't require inspiration. It requires identity. It requires you to see yourself as someone who simply does not stay down. It becomes part of your character, your code, your DNA. You get up because that's what you do. Not because things are easy, not because you're feeling good, but because it's who you are. That's the real difference between people who rise and those who stay stuck. The successful ones have trained themselves to act regardless of feeling. They've practiced standing up so many times that it becomes automatic. It's no longer a question of should I. It's a statement of I must. Discipline is the bridge between who you are and who you want to become. When you're down, when life hits you, when failure stings, when betrayal cuts deep, it is not your feelings that will lift you, it is your standards, it's the internal programming you've instilled through repetition. Because there will be days where the weight of disappointment makes you want to disappear, days when your energy is drained, your purpose feels distant, and nothing seems to be working, those are the moments where discipline steps in. Discipline becomes the override switch. It tells you get up anyway. It tells you move forward even when your mind screams to stop. Most people give up not because they're weak, but because they've never trained themselves to keep going when it hurts. They live reactively, ruled by comfort and emotion. But those who win, those who refuse to stay down, live proactively. They've made a decision that discomfort will not dictate their destiny. They know that if you let pain control your choices, you'll always retreat to safety. But if you use pain as fuel, if you keep showing up despite the ache, you'll build a strength that most people never understand. Discipline is a practice. It's forged in the quiet moments when no one is watching. It's built when you get out of bed on the day your heart is heavy. It's built when you keep your promise to yourself even when no one else would care if you quit. Every time you follow through on your commitment, you cast a vote for the person you're becoming. You prove to yourself that your word matters, and that builds self-respect, self-trust, and resilience, because it's not just about achieving goals. It's about becoming someone who doesn't abandon themselves when things get tough. People think strength comes from success. It doesn't. It comes from struggle, from resistance, from the days you get knocked flat and still choose to get up. That's how mental toughness is built. You don't get it from reading quotes or watching motivational videos. You get it from taking action when everything in you wants to stay down. You earn it by moving forward when no one's cheering for you, when the applause is gone, when the vision feels blurry. It's in those lonely moments that your power is forged. You want to change your life? Then stop negotiating with your emotions. Stop giving yourself an exit every time things get hard. Decide that no matter how many times you fall, you will rise. Decide that giving up is not an option, that staying down is not in your nature. Discipline doesn't ask for your permission. It doesn't care how you feel. It simply says, do the work. Whether that's training, creating, building, healing, or learning, do the work again and again and again until who you used to be is unrecognizable. You want to develop unshakable confidence, then stack undeniable evidence. Prove to yourself that you can be counted on, that you're not someone who caves under pressure, that you're not someone who stays down after defeat, because confidence isn't built by telling yourself positive affirmations while sitting still. It's built by keeping promises in the face of pain, by doing what's hard when you'd rather escape, by choosing growth over comfort again and again. Refusing to stay down becomes a habit when you make it non-negotiable. When you set a rule for yourself that quitting is simply not allowed, you eliminate the option. You remove the back door, and when your mind knows that you will keep going no matter what, it stops wasting energy trying to talk you out of it. That's when your mind shifts from fear to focus, from doubt to determination. Because it understands that no matter the obstacle you're coming through, you're not hoping, you're committed. Every champion was once a broken man who refused to stay down. Every leader was once doubted, dismissed, or defeated. But what separated them was not talent, luck, or timing. It was tenacity. It was the discipline to stand back up one more time than they were knocked down. And that's not a matter of external power. That's a matter of internal choice. You choose to be relentless. You choose to keep moving. You choose to act like a warrior, not a victim. Feelings are powerful. They have the ability to lift you to the highest peaks or drag you into the deepest valleys. But what most people fail to realize is that feelings are not facts. They are not fixed truths. They are simply temporary emotional state, signals, not commands. The problem is, people live their entire lives being slaves to how they feel. If they feel tired, they stop. If they feel afraid, they retreat. If they feel unworthy, they believe it. If they feel lost, they stay stuck. But what they don't understand is that you are not your feelings. You are the one experiencing the feelings, and because you are not your feelings, you are not obligated to obey them. Let that sink in. You can feel fear and still act. You can feel doubt and still move forward. You can feel pain and still perform. You can feel completely out of place and still belong in the room. You don't need to feel confident to do something great. You just need to do it. Most people sit around waiting for the perfect internal state before they make their move, never realizing that action is what creates the emotion, not the other way around. You don't wait until you feel motivated. You move and motivation follows. You don't wait to feel fearless. You take action and courage catches up. This is the core truth that separates those who create extraordinary lives from those who stay trapped in the ordinary. They act in spite of how they feel. Your emotions are valid, but they are not always accurate. Just because you feel like a failure doesn't mean you are one. Just because you feel lost doesn't mean your path is gone. Just because you feel defeated doesn't mean the game is over. Your emotional state is a reflection of your thoughts, your focus, your physiology, and your environment in the moment. It is not your identity. The problem is, people internalize their feelings. They make them personal. They say, "I am anxious," instead of saying, "I'm experiencing anxiety." That shift in language may seem small, but it's everything. When you say "I am," you make it who you are. When you say "I'm experiencing," you acknowledge the emotion without letting it define you. That single distinction is what gives you power, because the moment you create space between who you are and what you feel, you create choice, and choice is where all power lies. Most people believe their feelings are in control because they never trained their mind to see the distinction. They grew up reacting to emotion instead of responding to purpose. They were never taught that emotions are data, not dictators. That's why people quit when they're discouraged, lash out when they're angry, run away when they're afraid, and freeze when they're overwhelmed. But once you understand that emotions are simply a result of internal focus, interpretation, and meaning, you gain leverage over them. You stop letting them run the show, and you start leading your life from intention. Think about the most successful, driven, disciplined individuals you've ever seen. Do you think they always feel like showing up? Do you think they're free of fear, stress, or doubt? No. They've simply trained themselves to recognize emotion without obeying it. They understand that emotions fluctuate. Some days you wake up with fire in your chest, ready to attack the day. Other days you wake up with a fog in your head and a weight on your soul. But your feelings should never dictate your decisions. If they do, you'll live your life on a roller coaster up and down, forward and backward, trapped in cycles of inconsistency. To overcome negative feelings, you must first face them. Suppressing them doesn't work. Pretending they don't exist only strengthens them. The goal isn't to eliminate emotion. It's to understand it and act in alignment with your vision regardless of it. If you feel angry, ask yourself, what's this pointing me toward? If you feel fear, ask, what am I afraid of losing or failing? If you feel hopeless, ask, what meaning am I giving this situation? These questions create awareness, and awareness is power. Once you have awareness, you can shift your focus. You can challenge the thought patterns feeding the emotion. You can reframe the meaning, you can breathe differently, move differently, speak differently, and suddenly the emotion begins to shift, not because you suppressed it, but because you confronted it and chose a better response. The greatest warriors, leaders, creators, and thinkers didn't succeed because they were emotionless robots. They succeeded because they felt deeply but moved with clarity. They had moments of fear, anger, insecurity, and exhaustion, but they refused to let those moments define their movement. They learned that strength is not the absence of feeling, it's the dominance of choice over emotion, and that can only come from training, mental training, emotional awareness, a conscious decision every single day to lead from purpose, not from pain. It's also important to stop labeling certain emotions as bad. Negative emotions aren't your enemy, they are your messengers. Fear reveals where you're attached. Anger shows you where your boundaries are being crossed. Sadness highlights what you care about. Guilt reflects a misalignment with your values. Every emotion is feedback. The key is learning to interpret the signal without letting it control your system. Once you can do that, emotions become fuel. They become guides. You can use fear as a signal to prepare better. Use frustration as energy to push harder. Use disappointment as clarity to set a new standard. If you're constantly avoiding your feelings or acting only when you feel good, you're giving up your power. Life won't always feel good. Growth rarely feels comfortable. Change often comes wrapped in confusion and discomfort. But if you want to rise, if you want to overcome the mental and emotional storms that come with pursuing anything worthwhile, you have to become the kind of person who can feel everything and still choose action. You must train yourself to rise even when your emotions try to pull you under. That's how you develop emotional resilience, not by escaping negative feelings, but by standing tall in the middle of them and choosing the path that aligns with who you are becoming. Your life doesn't change because of what happens to you. It changes because of how you respond to what happens. That single truth, if fully understood and applied, will completely shift the direction of your destiny. Most people walk through life reacting. They react to pain, react to failure, react to criticism, react to fear, and every time they react, they surrender power. They give control of their life over to circumstances, people, emotions, and outcomes they cannot dictate. But you were never meant to live from reaction. You were designed to respond, with awareness, with strength, with vision, and with purpose. The person who learns to control their response is the person who commands their future. Your reactions write your reality. They shape your reputation. They determine how far you go, how strong you become, and how much you grow. When adversity hits, and it will, It doesn't ask permission. It shows up unannounced and unapologetic. Whether it's failure, heartbreak, betrayal, loss, rejection, or just the crushing weight of life, you are going to be tested, but those tests aren't about the event itself, they're about what you do next. They're about your reaction. Do you fall apart and stay down, or do you breathe deep, assess the situation, and decide how to respond from a place of strength rather than emotion? Most people crumble. Not because they're weak at their core, but because they never trained their response. They live reactive lives, always at the mercy of the next problem, the next person's opinion, the next mood swing. And over time, that reactivity becomes their identity. They say things like, "I'm just not good under pressure," or "I can't help how I feel," or "that's just how I am." But all of those are lies disguised as truth. You can help how you feel. You can get better under pressure. You can become someone new. You just haven't trained yourself to respond with power yet. Your response is your responsibility. That means no matter how unfair life feels, no matter how many things happen outside your control, you are always in control of what you do next. That's where your freedom lies. That's where your future is shaped. If someone disrespects you, your reaction decides if you lose control or gain clarity. If you fail at something you gave your heart to, your reaction determines if that failure defines you or refines you. If your world falls apart and everything you counted on disappears, your reaction is what determines whether you rebuild stronger or collapse completely. It's not what happens, it's what you do with what happens. You've been given the ability to choose your response. That's what separates you from animals, from instinct, driven life from predictable patterns. You have the ability to pause, reflect, and make a decision from intention rather than impulse. That's your edge, that's your advantage. Most people don't use it. They let their nervous system take over, they let their history dictate their behavior, and they let their pain become their compass. But if you step back and realize that every response is a vote for the life you're creating, you'll take it more seriously. When you respond with discipline, with wisdom, with focus, you shift your entire trajectory. You become the kind of person who is unshakable, not because life doesn't hit you, but because your reactions are rooted in strength. Your destiny isn't something floating out there waiting for you to find it. It's something you build with every decision, every action, every response. You're writing the story of your life moment by moment, and the pen is in your hand every time you choose how to respond. That means if you don't like the chapter you're in, you can write a new one. If you've been living in fear, reacting from insecurity, or repeating cycles of self-sabotage, you can change that, not by waiting for the world to shift, but by shifting how you show up. You don't need the perfect plan. You don't need every answer. You just need the strength to respond from power instead of pain, from vision instead of victimhood, from clarity instead of chaos. The moment you decide to take control of your responses, everything begins to change. You start to rise above your past. You begin to outgrow old patterns. You start making choices based on where you're going, not where you've been. That kind of power builds momentum. Every time you respond differently than you would have in the past, you reinforce a new identity. Every time you stay calm when you would have exploded, every time you push forward when you would have quit, every time you choose discipline over comfort, you prove to yourself that you're no longer who you used to be. And that proof stacks. It builds confidence, clarity, and conviction. It becomes the foundation for a completely different life. Even in moments of darkness, when everything feels like it's crashing down, you have a choice. You can choose to focus on what's gone wrong, or you can focus on what you can do about it. You can drown in disappointment, or you can extract wisdom from the wreckage. You can let the pain harden you into bitterness, or you can let it sharpen you into strength. This is where your power is, in the space between what happens and what you do next. The greater your awareness in that space, the greater your future becomes. Most people don't pause in that space. They react emotionally, impulsively, destructively. But if you train yourself to pause, to breathe, to think, to choose, you change the direction of your life, one decision at a time. Nothing is more powerful than a person who knows how to respond, not just in moments of celebration, but in moments of crisis. Not just when things are going well, but when everything feels like it's falling apart. because life isn't about avoiding storms. It's about becoming the kind of person who walks through the storm with head held high, not because they enjoy pain, but because they've trained themselves to lead themselves. They've trained themselves to respond from purpose, not panic, from strength, not sensitivity, from clarity, not confusion.